So as we talked about last week, this week I was going to take a look at the use of ChatGPT for energy analysis. So I do use this as a tool. I do not use it for the actual analysis when I'm doing a study. I use it primarily to provide me with some insight as to what I'm seeing, so that, you know, in data science and measurement verification, when we're going in and we're looking at energy bills and the energy consumption based upon any type of improvement, there's a lot of things that come into play. Now there's the simple ones, commercial sites and so on, where primarily just have lighting, computers, things like that are pretty constant. That's relatively easy. Then we just have to look at temperature, occupancy, you know, and do modeling of the building structure and so on in order to determine different things that can impact the energy consumption. Then we may run models to look and see what happens if we do things with air conditioning or lighting. Those are the most common things. Now we get into industrial facilities and we get into advanced analytics, meaning that we're looking at production rates. We're looking at energy use intensity of each individual machine, basically, things like that. Well, then we need to have some, you know, insights as to what we're looking at. So what we're going to cover today is I'm going to take some data, it's real data, for a site elsewhere, we'll just say. So it's from a few years ago, and we're going to take a look and we're going to see with what the insights look like before and after any applications, and we're going to allow ChatGPT to provide us some information related to what we're looking at. In this case, the information that come in was based on weekly production rates, but at the same time I was getting quarter-hour increment rates from the utility. So let's start by taking a look at kind of the energy consumption, actually all of the energy stuff. So we will take a look at, just say, usage data. And this is back between 2021 and 2022. And let's take a look at, this is what this particular utility provided. Okay, so let's miniaturize this so we can see the actual data. So across the top, we've got a start date, an end date, and then these include the time. So 00 is midnight, 15 is 12:15 a.m., and then so on. So this is the time range. This is the kilowatt hours used for that quarter hour. This over here is the demand. They have the kVAR, the kVAR hours, kVA, kVAH, and of course the power factor. So power factor does have an impact if it drops low enough in this facility. But the other thing is, this gives us the ability to take a look at a few things. The other things we're going to cover today, so we're gonna hit this first, and you notice there's a lot of blank spots in there. The other thing we're going to look at is consumption and production, but by week, and we're going to compare that to what we saw. And then this one here is the information off of an ECMS E1. So we're going to pull data from this, and this starts back then and kind of goes across. So we'll take a look at that as well. But these are already CSVs. I'm just kind of taking a look to see what's there, if there's anything we're interested in. There's some stuff here that you know, there's no point to this data, so let's get rid of it. This is kind of the cleanup part of data science. Now the next part with the data science would be to and we can get rid of this. This one here just says that, you know, just basically that the power was delivered. So we've got temperature, the This is looks like a daylight savings event, but we're going to get rid of that. Well, you know what? We're going to leave that in because it is something. So let's go ahead. We now have this information. So we're going to save this. And we're just going to go ahead and tell ChatGPT what we want it to do. Now, as I mentioned before, I've shaved off the left columns and so on. So I'm not going to use some of the tools that are in there. We're just going to use raw ChatGPT. Again, as I mentioned before, this is the licensed version. So I'm paying. It's a paid version. So we're going to be able to go through this. I'm trying to start early enough because last week what happened is by the time I started, everybody was using it, and it tends to bog down. So we're going to go ahead and we'll use this tool here, and we're going to import the data. So go up to my desktop, and then we're going to find. Now I could upload both, but let's start here. So this is just the usage data. Okay, so basically I'm saying review the energy data from our production plant, review the columns, determine what data is present in the temperatures, find anomalies and any point where there are changes that may represent energy savings applications. Okay, identify opportunities related to the power supply, which should be an average of 3 megawatt demand, and power factor, which in which fines of, let's say, 0.05 cents per kVAR. There's different ways that this would be represented. We're just going to go by kVAR. kVAR hour are imposed when the power factor falls below 0.85 average in across a week. Yeah, let's say 1 week. Usually it's a different period, but during 1 week, and are imposed for the next 3 months when it occurs. Okay, so we're going to let it provide analysis and graphics depicting where such events occur. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Now, I've given it some interesting demands. I've asked it to do some specific instructions. At the same time, I've asked it to analyze. Now, as we talked about before, it's going to go through and it's going to do a few things, and when it runs into an error, the newer version of ChatGPT is going to do a bunch of stuff. So here's the information there. You notice that it puts in nan where it's run into things. Now, one of the things of note is that it will tend to use Python in the analysis. So here we go. It's listing out what all the headers are. And that information is helpful in the analysis. Now, when everything's done, now I know what's there and what the definitions are, and I can use bits and pieces of the notes as part of the report. So let's see what it decides. Okay, now it's going through and it's setting mins, maxes, means, things like that. And you can see where it's done some of that information. It's continuing to set up the code to run the analysis. Now, in the past, what it would do is it would present this code, and I would have to put it in, say, a Jupyter Notebook or some other graphical display. Now, Jupyter Notebook is, the data scientist's toolbox. Let me turn off the sound here. So apparently, I have a busy weekend. So anyways, so it's continuing to run. You can tell because this here is here. Now, if I were to click on that, it would stop what it's doing. And that would be something like if I notice something is not quite right in what I'm looking for here, and I can go back up and I can add, subtract, or whatever, and then rerun that. Now, if I go back 2 or 3 steps and I change this, then everything after that I had done is gone. So here we go. It's putting together the graphics. So it's putting together the weekly average power factor. You can see we're under 0.85, so now it's seeing a couple of those things. And then here, daily use, peak and demand over time. So this side here is going to be my peak demand, and this side here is going to be my usage. Now, we know that what we discovered when we were doing the analysis was these values actually turned out to be high when we were doing the monitoring. So taking a look at this and then comparing it to some of the other stuff is important. Now, here we are, the mean, it falls above and below. And so then it comes down and it gives me recommendations. Okay. So it's going in and saying, basically to fully identify, do this. So it's providing me with some information that's helpful. The other thing I'll want to do is say, okay, identify changes in the energy consumption and compare to temperature to see if there is a correlation and if there are points where the consumption changes by more than 5%. Highlight using vertical red lines in charts. And I'm going to let it do its own charting. So I'm not telling it specific charting because it might say, hey, I need a scatter plot, or I need this, or I need this in order to identify certain things. Now, back in the day, before they released ChatGPT 4 to be able to access the internet, we were relying on some past stuff. Now, it's part of its training is it understands some things having to do with this and a whole lot of other things. So I can go through and I can say, I've got production this, and I've got this and this and this. What are some of the things, what are some of the oddities that I can pull out? Now, the online portion Okay, so there's a lot going on here. And, obviously really noisy. So I'm going to pull the red lines out. Okay, and it's identifying opportunities and everything else, but it doesn't have production data yet. Redo, removing red lines. So I just told it to redo that section. Now I could have gone back and say, hey, redo it. Now here's what's interesting. Each time I run this, it's going to look at it differently. So I can actually go through, identify things, have it run the exact same analysis, give the exact same instructions, and it's going to give me different results. So that's one of the fun things about this. Okay, so daily energy alongside average temperature over the observed period. Without highlighting days where energy consumption changed significantly, this allows for a straightforward comparison. Okay, so now I'm going to say, you know what? We need to add in our consumption data. So let's go ahead and we're going to find our consumption and production by week. For the same plant, this is production and consumption by week. Production is in pounds. We'll just say kilograms. Product produced. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, there's the production data had been presented in weight, pounds or kilograms, whatever, for what's being produced, and we're noting that the energy is following along with that. Identify the energy intensity per kilogram, and where there are improvements in energy use per kilogram by date. These may represent energy improvements or changes. Okay. Now again, I just have kilowatt hours and a few other things. I don't have too much other detail, but let's take a look and say, note where there may be energy anomalies, such as voltage or load changes that impact. Include temperature correlation from the, let's see if this will, from the prior data. Both data sets represent the same facility. Okay, so let's go ahead and again, I could shorten this up, I could do other things, I could just say, hey, here's some data, go take a look and tell me what you see. And let's see what it comes up with, because I'm looking for specific things. Okay, so here's the volume, there's the kilowatt hours. Okay. It's identified what the columns are, and then it's telling me what the process is going to be. So here it is, it's putting together the code for me. Now what's nice about that is I can copy this and put it over into a spreadsheet, and if it's something where I'm going to get CSV files that are similar, and I like what it's putting out, I can repurpose this for other locations, that kind of thing. So as I develop stuff, I can actually make little code snippets to run and do the analysis that I'm looking for. Now, next part past this is going to be a little more complex, because we're going to look at this and extend it beyond it, and say, hey, we have data from a system that's monitoring the energy consumption. Again, here we go. Here's the code associated with what it's doing. So you can see here there's changes all across time that vary, and there's the average temperature. So it's kind of looking at everything. It's still running. It's going to tell me if there's a correlation or not with the temperature. Okay, so what is blue? Blue is the average temperature over this period. And here's the energy intensity. Now, whatever happened here, this is an anomaly. This is basically an outrider. So I do know, because I've looked at this data before, I actually performed a more in-depth analysis, was that this anomaly right here was when we were provided with production data. They doubled up some weeks by accident. So this is actually multiple points. This is more than 1 week of production tumbled into 1 week of production, so that it made it look like this was really efficient. So, overall, this line down here is the one I'm more concerned about, and then you can see that there's maybe some. So it will give me some definitions based on what it sees. So March 14th, a 3.9% reduction in energy intensity. March here, another 4% reduction, and then it says some weeks showing substantial improvements starting June 13th. So this would be over here, where they had a 23% reduction and a 24% reduction. And then when we see this August 1st, which is obviously this one, suggesting almost 100% reduction, that's not a good thing. So it does show, and what in my prior analysis, before I started this, I initially looked at the data. This said there was a correlation of about 3%. Here it's saying it's not clear cut. So either I had worded it differently, or it looked at the data differently, which is most likely. Is there an improvement in energy consumption per kilogram across the data provided? By how much? Okay, so graph any changes. Okay, so always want the graph part too, because I can download these graphs. If I have something that sticks out and looks nice, I don't have to then take it and toss it into Jupyter and then run the thing and show I can actually cut and paste these off. Okay, and so we're definitely moving a little faster than that last week. So okay, across the data, slight improvement of minus 0.7%. Okay, what happens? Remove the August 1 data and rerun the average and changes from start to finish to see what improvements based on consumption per kilogram. Okay. So let's remove that really wild high peak data because that's throwing off our analysis, right? So part of data science is going through and identifying those outliers and saying it's an outlier, it's unusual, we don't know why, or we do know why, and I know why, and then toss it out. So it's still showing. Okay, so I missed it. It gave me a bad date then. Remove any energy intensity over 2 kilowatt hours per kilogram. Okay, and rerun analysis on any changes or improvements. So what it's saying is there's a negative improvement in there. Okay, so it's running the analysis again. This time I'm having it find and remove that data set that's giving me an anomalous reading. Why do we want to remove anomalies? Well, we're not clear as to why. I mean, if I had just received this data and then we're still at that, and then here's our averages and so on. So overall improvement remains approximately minus 0.7, so less than 1%. Reduction, or meaning their energy consumption actually increased a little bit. So let's take a look now, because we have other data, because this is straight utility data. We also did some monitoring. Now this was interesting because when we did the monitoring, we identified that there were some issues with the utility data. So let's try something first. Now this data is directly from an empath ECMS output. So we're going to go ahead, and the first thing I'm going to do is take this. So this is the transformer data. Now you notice it an MDB file. So I'm going to see if I can pull anything out of the MDB file. Okay, so let's see if it can do that. Now, spoiler alert, no, it shouldn't be able to do that because there it goes. Unfortunately, Pandas access is not available in this environment. So earlier when I tried to run this, it was basically attempting to obtain the tables by running ODBC and a few other things that would work for other stuff. So it basically, all that was to say it can't do that. So we're going to do something instead. So this is where we get into the data polishing. So let's go ahead and we're going to open up this database. Now this data was set up specifically to run energy analysis. So let's open this up so we can see it. This is basically data having to do with the transformer and so on. These are the tables we're interested in. So here we are. We've got the current, the voltage. Now this is going to give us some additional ability to analyze data. Our measured power factor, which is different. The total power in watts for each phase. So this is all by phase. total harmonic distortion as well at that point, and then percentages of load and everything else. So we're going to export this data, and we're going to get rid of some of this stuff. Now here I've got time as well. So I've got the date and I've got the time. Now the question is, what's going to happen when I export that data? Am I going to be able to keep that? Let's see. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to export the data. We have to do it as an Excel database, right? We want to do an Excel database. We could do it as a text file, but that can confuse the system because we'd have to parse the data and everything else. Okay, so we want to export. It gives us some options. We're going to leave it as a standard Excel spreadsheet. We're going to change this location to our desktop. Okay, we're going to leave it as real-time table 1. Okay, we're going to do a couple of things here. Open the destination file after. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the data and clean it up as soon as we export it. Then we have to do the same thing for the other two, because the data for each of these, in particular, okay, so with the save export steps, we don't need to save those. We're going to change them when they come back out. Okay, so here we go. So one of the things I noticed was here, I just have a date. I've lost my time. So that's a concern. So we can go back in and manipulate it, which we can easily do. Or for now, we'll just leave it that way. So what I am going to do is get rid of components of the table that aren't going to provide us any information. Okay, so we'll leave load, but let's get rid of this stuff here because we don't have efficiency, we don't have slip, obviously. We'll leave power factor variation in there. Line frequency, RPM isn't necessary. Pull pass, yeah, so these are basically motor related. So let's get rid of these. So I have this now. So I have this table here. Now I want to do File, Save As. We are going to save it to the desktop. Okay, so desktop. And we are going to change this to a CSV. So let's see, CSV, delimited. Okay. Real-time table 1. So I'm going to make a note that current voltage THDC, THDV, and then R per phase. Okay, power and yeah, okay. So power is going to be added together. Power factor is going to be averaged, and so on. So okay, so I have this one. So let's go ahead and get out of there. Okay, and we're going to go to real-time data 2. We're going to perform the same thing. So it's going to show up there. Select these. Okay. And it's going to export this one then too, and then we'll repeat it for the last one. Then we're going to bring everything together, and then we're going to also end up, it doesn't look, I think this is for after the period, so we're going to just look at this by itself. Okay, and then I think I selected to open. Do. Oh, and there we are. Okay, so here we are, same thing again. Let's get rid of this. What are we going to total? Okay, so load. I'm going to get rid of this because we're going to leave load, right? Get rid of this stuff here. We did have a power factor variation. Did have line frequency, but it's only showing up in table 1. RPM, etc., is not anything we have an interest in. So here's what's interesting is load only in table 1, power factor variation only in table 1, and line frequency is only in table 1. But we want to note that. Okay, so I'm going to minimize, or we'll exit out of this. We're going to file, save as, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to call this again, we're going to call this a CSV. Okay, and we're going to save it on the desktop. Okay, let's get rid of these. And last but not least, the third one. So why do we need these all three? Because we have to add them all together. Okay, so correct. Once it's done, I can get rid of access, and then we can start analyzing the recorded data, and we can do a comparison back wherever there's an overlap. Now, I will say I do know that the empath data is more correct. Okay, load efficiency. Okay. So here we are, and then we'll do the same thing. We're going to file, save as, CSV, and then again we're going to make sure it's saved to the desktop for this. For what we're doing, I would normally save it into a project file. Let's go ahead there and real-time data 3. Okay, and let's get rid of that, and we can get rid of this. No. Okay, so here we go. The direct result are these three files, and I am going to go ahead just to keep everything clean and get rid of the original Excel spreadsheets. Let's go ahead. I'm going to want to have this one open as a reference. Okay, so here's my open as a reference. I am now going to go back in here, and we are now going to import all 3 files. Okay, so I can import all 3 files now, unless it runs into a problem. It might say, oh, too large or whatever else. But I do want all 3. Okay. Compare data and headers for all 3 CSV. Create new columns based on data being provided in quarter hours by date. Okay, so new column based on quarter hours by date. Add power as kilowatts across all 3 files into the third into a new column called demand in kilowatts, and kilowatt hours as quarter hour increments. .25 times demand. Okay, and let's see. Graph. Oh, yeah, graph data from a complete, let's see, demand, blend, or I can say concatenate or whatever I want, blend all 3 into one table. And show the first 5 rows. Cool. I could say show more. Default is 5 rows anyways. So we're going to bring this stuff in. I'm going to have it create another table. I've had it create another table. In the end, it's going to add the extra. I may have made some mistakes. We'll see what it looks like in a second. Or it might make some assumption and say, well, you're incorrect about something, so let's change this. So combine table, so it's concatenating, and it'll bring that all in. Now, here we go. So it took So I believe I made an error. So I come in here and look at power. Yeah, you can see 827. So that should be combined. So I'm going to say redo table. We want to show for the same dates and times, rows should be identical in all three tables, or all three CSV. Three columns of current, voltage, power factor, add the 3 kilowatts power into one, 3 phases of THD, V and C, show load, show PF variation, divide sum of each row's power, and divide by 0.25 to represent kilowatt hours in quarter hour increments. So let's see if this comes out better. Should have told it to show me the first 5 rows again. So it's summarizing the instructions I gave. And again, if it defines what I said incorrectly, I'll end up with bad data. I could have put all this stuff together ahead of time straight in Excel, and if I find that I'm running through a constant issue, you know, I have to keep going in and making changes, etc., etc., then the end result will be, to go back, do it myself, bring it in again as one table, one CSV file, and have it run everything. So, you can't get away with allowing it to do everything. I could sit here and try to figure out exactly how the commands go. Now, as we talked about last week we had a lot of problems with ChatGPT because it was really acting up and it was giving me wrong stuff and everything else. This week, it seems to be running a little bit smoother. Now, that is one of the challenges as we go through all of this, is it's going to change from time to time. Yeah, let's see if I can grab my pen. Okay, there we go. Sorry, I didn't mean to shine the head at you. It's still running, so let's see what happens. Well, let's actually take a quick look here. So merge all. Okay, it's saying merge total power, and then add those together, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so it's saying to add those together. That's good. That's what I told it to. And then take the total of that and then divide by 0.25, and then create all of the different columns. So here we go. These are the columns I asked. Motor current 1, 2, and this one did not give it a T1. So there would be 1, 2, and whatever. 1, 2, and whatever. 1, 2, and whatever. Now, I could have asked it to, I can ask it to modify that when it's done, but for our purposes, we're not going to. We're just going to go ahead and let it run for a few more minutes. So it should end up, whoop, it ran into a problem. It said, whoops, here's the operation, and performed encountered a memory issue, likely due to the size of all the data. Okay, so basically we ran into a constraint in this. So I'm going to say take smaller sections of data and then concat the collection of tables completed. Show first 20 rows and done. So basically I'm saying take smaller sections of the data at a time. Let's see if it can do that. So I'm telling it to handle smaller chunks of the data. Okay, and now it's what it's saying. It's going to do that. It's going to start over. It's going to take subsets. It's going to then do everything that I've asked it to do. There we go. So it's creating subsets. So the idea now is it's going to take and it's going to perform the action on smaller groups. This can extend the amount of time, but I'm not stopping saying, oh my gosh, it's too bad. I mean, I can, as long as I can upload the data, I should be able to do it in chunks. So in this case, it's saying the chunk sizes are going to be about 500. That's probably 500 lines. Right, okay, it is. Okay, so we're going to let it do that, and then there we go. It's showing what it's creating. So that's the first one. And here we go. They managed to merge the data. So here we go. We're done. We've got the data now. And it's taking a look at everything. Now let's see what it thinks we are as far as... okay, so total power. There we go. That looks more like what I would expect to see from that location. Now total kilowatt hours is incorrect. Okay, so basically I'm saying, okay, not too bad, let's redo this. So it's saying, okay, well, I'm not going to go back and redo everything. I am going to take and there we go. So now we're into numbers that make more sense, right? Total kilowatt, corrected total kilowatt hours. Okay, so now we have the corrected total kilowatt hours, and here we go. It's creating, yeah. Okay, so we're saying, okay, we're not going through and we're running into data. So it's basically saying, here's what it's going to look like, and there we go. So I wanted to remove the column called total kilowatt hours and change the name for the corrected total kilowatt hours to kilowatt hours usage. So I'm going to have it do that. So right now what we're doing is we're treating the data and we're setting it up so that we can then go in and analyze what that data says. Now, depending on what, so there we go. So total power, now we got kilowatt hours usage. Now I have data that I can take a look at. I can have it drop additional columns because there's some here, that are obviously zeros for each one, right? So here we go. Okay, there we go. So compare kilowatt, let's see, demand and kilowatt hours usage on any overlapping dates from the prior data sets. Show variations in as a graph. Let's see, identify percentage difference. Okay, so it's basically saying what its assumption is and everything else. So they're going to do a simplified, which makes sense. That's what I want. I want it just to be simplified. So let's see what it looks like before and after. Okay. Okay. So graph original data set of overlapping dates and new data set of overlapping dates. So what I'm doing here is I'm going back and saying how consistent is the original data versus the new data in order to see if there are issues with either the utility data or the meter or our meter data. And let's see if it does something. If it doesn't, I'm going to go in and I'm going to perform this similar analysis to what we were looking at. And I'm also going to do some quick power analysis. Okay, so it's not going to run it. So what I want to do too is I want to make sure I download the table we just created. So I'm telling it I want to have something to download that data set. Okay, so one of the things I'm going to do is download the data set we created. As you can see, there it is. So let's open it up. Now this is all stuff we couldn't do 2 months ago. just so you're aware. So all of this new feature, the ability to create and download the data set, that's only occurred since the first of the year. So, or maybe towards the end of last year. But let's see what it did for me. So here's, the date, and here's all the voltages and currents and power factors and everything else, and our usage. So this way, I can go back later and I can do some of my own graphs. So let's do something here real quick. Let's go ahead, and I'm just going to quickly insert and allow that to come up with something here, so I can kind of take a look and see what's going on across this period of time, right? So you see that there. Not going to save it. Okay, let's get rid of this, and we can close this out. Okay, so now let's take a look at a few things. First, let's take a look across that period. Review demand and kilowatt hours across the new data set, and provide insights. Okay, so I'm going to allow it to do that. Then we're going to go back, because I want to take a look at a few things. I want to take a look at what's going on with the voltage, what's going on with the current, and so on. Okay, analysis got. Okay, and then now I don't have production data available for this period that I can use in this presentation. Okay, it's suggesting things to look for. Okay, so it is now basically finished. As soon as I see this stuff down here, I know it's finished. This, by the way, allows me to copy this and paste it. So if it's something I want to put into some documents for notes or whatever else, so I'm not relying, because there's been a few times when I've been using ChatGPT and I've kept stuff online saved, and then along comes whatever update, and they say, well, we deleted all of your stuff. So if I have specific things I'm interested in, I can do that. So review the demand and usage across the period, and identify any spaces where identify any changes in either on average, okay, or mean, and discuss those locations, dates, not locations, dates, and if they are consistent after that change. Assume production is similar to the original production data imported for the same time periods. Okay, so we're going to let it take a look, and then we're going to go in and start looking at voltage conditions, current conditions, variations, so on. I did say graphic, didn't I? No. So here is where we'll go back and we're going to stop it. I'm going to edit this. Show graphics. Obtain no weather data for, I'll pick a spot in Ohio, Akron, Ohio, to determine any temperature correlation. Okay, now we got that. Now let's go ahead and, I think it was NOAH, but it'll figure it out. It's going to basically jump up and grab data, weather data. It should. It was able to before. And we're going to go a little longer than normal today. Sorry, folks. Yeah, this will be a long one. I'm figuring we'll probably do an hour, 20 hour and a half. But the idea is to get a look and see what this will do. I could split it up into multiple ones, but really, do you want to? Or is this fun? Okay, I'm a nerd. So it's going back, and it's looks like it's going to try to get the data. Okay. Okay, it's looking at, so it added in temperature range, right? So our black is going to be temperature. Actual analysis. So it's giving all the reasons why it can't give me something pure. But let's see what it thinks. Okay, so temperature is in there as it looks like maybe this, and temperature, oh yeah, so temperature is this. Green is total power in kilowatts. Now why is that showing as 1,000? Okay, so that should be okay. Let's try that. Yeah, hopefully you're going to run it. It's basically saying you should do this, which means exporting the data, etc., which basically I've exported now the data that it put together. I can do a verification on that Excel spreadsheet, the CSV. If I wanted to, I could then start from the beginning and upload all the data and then start playing with it, but really I'm trying to pull out some ideas here. Okay, so now it's suggesting that I might want to do energy management stuff. Okay, now we're getting out there. So let's go ahead and let's say compare phase voltages and graph voltage unbalance and as a percentage, and graph over or under voltage as a percentage, under as a negative. Okay. Let's see, over and under. Voltage nominal, or nominal voltage is 12,460 volts. So let's start with this. Okay, so it's lost our data. That's not unusual. So we're going to go ahead and end up uploading our data. Yeah, it's just showing me how I would do it. We'll let it run, and then I'm going to go ahead and we will upload the data set that we created. Okay, so it's basically, I could go in, I could use the code snippet for stuff and so on, but it's lost control. Okay, so what we can do here is I can continue in this vein, or what I am actually going to do is start a new chat session. We're going to upload our data. We're going to say review CSV file and show headers. Determine which, let's see, list headers and excuse me, assume definitions for a three-phase system with this data measured at the utility meter, which it was. Okay, let's take a look. So you see, that's where ChatGPT just went and flew apart. And it looks like we're hitting the time of day when more people are going to jump on. But I want to do the quick voltage analysis just to show you what you can do. And then we'll do, we'll just do that. Because I could go through and I could analyze each component here. I can look at the energy consumption. I can graph it. If I have production data, I can merge it along with everything else and produce information on energy impact over time. For the actual period where we had analyzed it initially, we had an average of 3,000 and some kilowatt hour, 3,000 some kilowatts, and it's now dropped down to under 2,500 kilowatts on average. So that ended up being a significant energy reduction based upon the work we were doing. And it looks like we're going to be at the end of what ChatGPT is going to be able to do for us today. And like I said, this happens relatively often. I think I mentioned that before, but we'll give it just a few more minutes. And if it's able to do it, fantastic. If not, we'll end this week and return to this data set next week. Okay, so here we go. Voltage for phase 1, voltage for phase 2, and voltage for phase 3. Okay, so here's what we want to do. Review voltage for voltage unbalance and over and under voltage conditions as percentages across the data set. Use 12 for 60 volts as the supply voltage, as the nominal voltage. Okay. Produce as a graph where under voltage shows as a negative percent and all the other conditions show as a positive percentage. Okay, so this is what I wanted to do. So here we can go through and we can get a quick identification, and then, and I probably should have done it as part of it, I can say identify dates where these events occurred. It's throwing in a lambda function. Yay! Okay, and now let's see what it shows. So voltage unbalances, look at that. We're hitting some pretty high values. We're showing down as low as 5% under voltage, and then where's our over voltages? Oh, here's our over voltages. Okay, so these are under and over voltages, and this is voltage unbalance. So we're not quite as bad as I figured we might be, and this is after corrections were made, because the prior year is when we were seeing all of the other conditions, but there's still voltage unbalances coming into the plant are pretty significant. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and I just want to do one more thing. Look, average the three power factors and graph showing with a graph with the line turning red below 0.85 and green above and yellow from 0.85 to 0.90 and green above 0.90. And we'll let that run real quick. Okay, so here's the spots. Red is where it went below 0.85, and yellow is where it's basically above 0.85, and green is where we have a higher power factor. So that's kind of interesting. So that says that we're not too bad with power factor, and so chances are that we wouldn't be running into anything in particular. I believe this particular site, they said 0.85 is their limit, so not too bad. Let's see. That should do it. Let's see. Let's graph. Graph total power and usage. show changes over time as a percentage increase or decrease relate to temperature history for the Akron, Ohio area. Okay, leave out temperature. Now it's getting finicky again. It should be able to pull temperature data, and it should be able to look at the time column in the database, but it did not. So okay. So up and down, up and down. What is the average usage difference from the start to end of the data set? Okay, so here's where we can take a look at this real quick. Okay, so about the same, okay. Now let's go ahead and I'm going to just for fun bring in my other data set because I really want to get this. Compare the average usage, kilowatt hours, from this data set to the prior data set, and graph. So that one there was to October 22, 2022. The one I have is from about that time frame on. Oh. There we go. It identified that couldn't have been right. Let's go ahead and compare the proper column. So it identified which one would be usage and which one would be the other. And let's see. Oh, it threw another error again. Appears there was a reset. Hopefully we didn't lose our data. Okay, there we go. So it's found both. It's identified that they're both different. So what it's doing is it's correcting itself. These are some of the improvements that occurred. Okay. What is it suggesting? Okay, prior set data set to new data set. Okay, so what's the percentage difference? Kilowatt hours. Okay, so reduction of about 4% across all the average. So that means that, if there is a change, I'm going to end up needing to go back into graph the values from the overlapping dates. What I may have to do is have it summed by date, but let's see what it comes up with. Okay, so it did what I would do. So average. So this is the overlapping dates. Now, blue is the prior data set and yellow is the current data set. So this is where they start to vary a little bit. And the current data set we know is more accurate. So the blue one, that indicated some interesting things. So let's go ahead, exclude overlapping dates and show the average and graph the usage before and after, as well as display percent change for the non-excluded data. So it may or may not, it might define what I say by non-excluded. That depends, usually does. Okay, so we've excluded those dates and let it run the percentage. So I can continue on, I can analyze it further. It's given me some ideas, it's identified some conditions. I can go back to both this new set and the prior set and start taking a look. Then I can throw in, if I'm able to, I can throw in production data and get an idea. So this is now telling me the new average here on the right versus the average from before is down by about 7%. Now if I come over here and I look for a similar time period, I can take a look at that as well. What would really be good is to take a look at the changes over here and then compare it to the changes this time. I can see this peak here and these peaks here right around the August time frame are most definitely different. Okay, so compare August of 2021 to August of 2022 using both data sets and graph and calculate difference in consumption. One last one and then we'll be done. So this one, folks, I am so sorry it's turned into a lecture, but I thought this would be an interesting little segment. Plus we got to see how out of sync this one's going to be. Okay, so it did a summary by day. And then it's going to graph our consumption by day over August versus August. Okay, with, it looks like, oh, okay, total consumption August 29th. Okay, compare let's say compare August time frame from either data set. No, basically saying, because what it did is it set everything to 0, so it's a huge change, and it's as far as a percentage. So what we're doing is I'm now saying, okay, we probably have to just go to the 1. Now that I thought was an overlapping period, but this could be ChatGPT having a little fit again. So let's see what happens. Yeah, okay, so it's going to compare August 21 to itself. Yeah, of course, it's going to be 0. (2021) and 2022 from either data set. Need to get specific, I guess. And click regenerate. Here we go. Let's see what it thinks this time. Or again, we're just enjoying some of the fun of ChatGPT, right? Okay, it had an error again. Okay, so we have something. There we go. So it's showing that there was a reduction. Okay, and what is the percentage reduction? There's times when I go and I say, what is the percent, please, or something like that. I can do that. So about 9%. I haven't put in to see what changes have occurred with production rates, and that's something I can do at another time. But with that, let's go ahead and end. We've gone on far longer than I normally do, but this was a little more intense. Plus, it shows you some of the struggles you might run into. But I didn't pause at any time. This has all occurred within an hour and a half. If I had sat down and I did the data science and the programming and everything myself, we're talking about a few days worth of work. So in effect, this part here where I'm kind of taking a look at the data, seeing what the data, what it sees as the data from a completely different standpoint, with only the biases from the system and whatever I type in showing, but truly it's in between both discussions or both chats I have on there. I have some notes for how I could go back in and analyze this data in a way to make it useful. And with that, have a great time. Next week, we're going to, I don't know. Next week will be a bit of a surprise. So we'll talk then. Part of the reason why is I'm going to be at a technical wind meeting at Argonne National Labs this week, specifically discussing the powertrain in wind turbines and the result of our research on some of the specific conditions and what can be done to lengthen the life of main bearings and the gearboxes. With that, we will see you next week.